Okay, friends, it's Wednesday and we're on day 3 of a brand new reading plan. We're reading through the letter of James. And I have to be honest, of all of the readings of James, this is probably the one that really digs at my heart the most, the one I've done personally the most work to try and be better at, because Greek blood runs through my veins. At least 50% of me is Greek. And if you know anything about Greek people, we are passionate, we are loud, we are driven underneath the surface in some ways by anger. And so when James says, be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger, like I feel like he's talking directly to me. So this is a particularly challenging passage in James, but it's one that I think you'll probably agree is super important for us to think about and really try and get under the surface and understand what he's trying to talk about. There are a couple of things that stick out about this passage and the few verses that come right after in today's reading that I just want to share with you. And one thing to just keep in mind, we're reading the ESV. In verse 19, it says, "Know this, my beloved brothers." Anytime you see brothers, I mentioned this in our email for this week, the word that's being used there in Greek, it has no gender. It's really just a way of talking about the larger group of people in a familiar standpoint. So you could interpret this brothers and sisters and it wouldn't change the meaning at all. In fact, it is almost impossible to think that James would be speaking to only the men of Jewish, or come on, he's talking to both men and women, brothers and sisters. I just want, as you're reading this book and you see brothers, just in your mind, say brothers and sisters. Write it out on here if you want to. So this is what he says. Let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. This is something that we know deep down in our bones to be true. How often have you said something out of anger or erupted out of anger and fiery passion that you then go back to regret once you've had time to think about it? I used to hear this old therapist adage, don't go to bed angry. I think what James is telling us is, no, you actually do need to go to bed angry. You need to sleep on it. You need to give yourself time to really think about it, to reflect on it, to ask yourself, why am I angry? What's triggering me in this moment? Don't just erupt in raw emotion to what you're hearing. Be slow to speak. Take a second, take a break. Let your, they call it the lizard brain, let your lizard brain relax so that your calmer self can take control. When we erupt in anger and are quick to speak, we're quick to let our anger get the best of us. What we're doing is essentially hurting people. I haven't said anything in anger that hasn't been hurtful toward the other person. And if I'm really honest, when I'm really angry and I'm speaking out of anger, I'm not 100% sure that my motivations aren't actually to hurt the person or to hurt them in a way that they've hurt me or rile them up in a way that I'm riled up. So what James is saying is we have to take the opposite approach. We have to break the cycle of hurt people, hurting other people, and just take a step back and take a breath. How many people do you know who are really slow to speak? Don't they just give off this calm, put together presence? That's the kind of person that James wants us to be. And really, I think this is the teaching that comes from Jesus. I think he's pulling this directly from his time with Jesus, because angry people are not people who are in realistically right standing with God. Now, that's not to say that anger is not righteous. James is not saying you shouldn't be angry. Don't feel your feelings. He's saying be careful how you act on them. Before you speak out of that anger, before you let that anger be the thing that drives you, think about it for a minute. And here's the most important piece to this. Right after he talks about this, put away all filthiness, rampant, okay, go down to verse 22. But you could almost read this as like instead of erupting in anger, instead of being quick to speak, here's what we do instead. Be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. Be doers of the word. So when it comes to our speech with other people, we're to be slow, we're to be reflective, to pause, to listen, to hear first, and then react. But when it comes to what we hear in the Word, it's almost like we have to take the opposite approach. We can't just sit back. We can't just be hearers. When it comes to the Word, we actually have to be doers, right? And this is, again, something that we know instinctively to be true. When you tell your kids to listen to you, you're not telling, hear the words that I'm saying. You're actually telling them, and then do what I'm asking you to do. And so I think this is a really interesting dynamic. At first, be better listeners. Be better listeners. Be slow to speak. And then James flips the script almost and says, but when it comes to the Word, when it comes to God's wisdom, don't just be listeners. Don't just sit back. Actually do what you're being told to do. And that's just something that sticks out to me in today's reading. I would love to know what's sticking out to you. Obviously, we didn't cover all of today's reading, but I think this is just me sharing my heart for what's hitting me a little bit differently this morning. Hope you're enjoying this reading plan. And again, we'd love to hear from you if you want to share your thoughts, even in the comment section below if you're on social media, or send us an email.